Where is InsurTech headed next? This is where indie agents own the answer. Welcome to the Vertafore Insurance Podcast. Let's go. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Vertafore Insurance Podcast. I am the Mayor, Heath Sheeran, and the host of today's show, and I'm excited to be here with my man, Drew Kinney of the Kinney Insurance Agency in the self-proclaimed syrup capital of the world in Vermont. How you doing, Drew?
Maple syrup. Come after us, Canadians. That's fine.
Yeah, maple syrup. Okay, so it's maple syrup. Is there a difference in syrup? Yep. I'm not. To me, all syrup is maple.
Some producers do produce, from birch and some other things.
Oh, okay.
So it's not always all maple, no.
Okay, so you just called out all the Canadians that listen, saying, "Come at you."
No, that's fine.
That's hilarious. So,
I love our Canadian friends. Jeff Roy is my man.
There you go. Now look at you backtracking.
Yeah, no, I'm here for the battle, but I'm just saying.
There you go.
I love those guys.
That's awesome. Okay, so now that we know that you love your maple syrup,
yep.
Talk to me a little bit about the Kinney Insurance Agency. Tell me kind of your origin story, where you came from. Tell me a little bit about the agency. You and I have talked about it, but I want the world to know here that's listening. And so we'll start there, and then we'll just dive into some conversation.
Sure. No, that sounds great. So Kinney Insurance Agency was founded in 1973 by my grandfather. So we're third generation insurance agency, South Hero, Vermont, which is a tiny little island on a lake in Vermont. So it was kind of this unique spot. And he actually got into insurance after doing a career in dairy farming. So he retired and he had heard that there was this agency, which was an exclusive agency at the time, that was for sale. And so he decided to jump into it. And my father joined him a few years later, and then my brother and I hopped in and got involved in 2012. And so in 2018, my brother and I bought it from my father. So we kind of moved it to the third generation, which isn't always easy to do in this current environment. But no, it's been going great. We're at 3 locations now. We've done a few acquisitions, 20 plus employees. So, we're cruising along and kind of doing our thing.
So how many of the generations are still involved? Is it just you and your brother now? Is your father or grandfather still involved?
No, my grandfather's passed. My father still comes in. He'll do his thing in the morning, but he's pretty toned back at the moment, and it's pretty much Alan and I doing our usual, trying to keep up with everything.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I'm second generation as well, and my brother's in the business too. And that was one of the things. So, yeah, do you and your brother divide up tasks pretty well? I mean, like, what's your role there and his role? Do y'all kind of overlap at all, or what happens there?
There's inevitably some overlap, but yeah, we divide up pretty well. It's funny, when we were working with our dad, we had this running joke, right? And it was, anytime something came up that it wasn't something that we wanted to do, we would volunteer the other person for it, and they would become we all wear a million hats in the insurance world. Yeah. They would become the vice president of whatever that was. So I became the vice president of social media because Alan didn't want to deal with that. And he became, vice president of HR. So I felt like that was a pretty fair trade. But yeah, so that's always been kind of a running joke of, somebody comes with a problem. Oh, good news, Alan's the vice president of that department.
That's awesome. So with social media, does that most technology comes to you as well? Is that how that works with you too?
Yeah, I'd say, on the front end, I tend to do a lot of that early research, and then, we'll bring it back and I'll say, all right, here's kind of what we got. Although I will say he was more heavily involved with when we brought Vertafore into our agency, with AMS 360 back in the day. But I tend to do a lot of early research on various vendors and partners that are out there and test their kind of software out. And if I like it, I'll bring it to him. And, part of the other sort of agreement that we have with these type of things is, if I'm not passionate enough to be able to convince him of this idea that it's solid, then it's probably not a great idea and we won't run with it. So we're pretty conservative in that regard. So I have to feel like it's a good tool and he'll, if he agrees, we'll roll with it.
Yeah, and every time I see you, though, I feel like y'all are adopting a new piece of technology or you're researching something new. And so I don't know what that portfolio looks like at this point, but go ahead.
try to stay ahead of it, and that's kind of the key is, we just want to stay, what's out there. And a lot of times when we work with these vendors, the Kinney sales process is relatively slow. It's an early thing, we're not going to get closed early on. And so there's some that, I'll demo their product and we might sit on it for a year or two and, and then to finally decide, all right, the timing's right for this XYZ product. And, we've already kind of done this legwork and we'll kick the tires again and then we'll move pretty quickly. But the initial process is a little slower, but, we kind of like to make sure it's going to be a fit.
Yeah. So with that much tech and 3 locations, you said, and you're growing in staff and whatnot, getting adoption from your team has got to be somewhat of a challenge. Is it? Do you find that to be a challenge?
Yeah. So early on, Nick, we were early adopters in the CRM, world. And, in those days, kind of pre-AgencyZoom days even, which we were pretty heavy users of now, we were launched into HubSpot. And this was also something that we had, researched the heck out of for a long time, because I don't know how familiar you are with HubSpot, but it's pretty expensive. And, so we rolled it out and we were using it pretty well and got decent adoption from the sales team. But, we're 20 plus people. And so to get some of our folks, that had to do dual entry and some of this other stuff that you have to do with HubSpot, to see it as a valuable tool to them just wasn't there. It was tough to convince somebody that when they're in the arena and, the phones are ringing off the hook that, we got to enter this in over here, when they've already sold this opportunity and it's in AMS and we're good to go like how we used to. So AgencyZoom with that direct integration in those early days was, critical to getting adoption from the team, because that just changed our process out the gate. It was, start in AgencyZoom, enter all the client's info, and we could manage and track sales, that much better. And every time we did it, it was creating new customers in 360. And, just that streamlined process was pretty clutch.
So, yeah, bringing in, like you talked about the adoption team and you talked about you do a lot of the research. At what point do you bring the team in? I know you said you bring your brother in, after you get set up. Do you bring them in early?
Alan's usually number 2, because if we even want to kick the tires, right? And then once I've sort of got him convinced, usually there's 1 or 2. So like with the CRM side, I had a marketing lady at the time, and I had a sales guy. And so it was like you get some power users kind of early on, some early adoption, and they can test and kind of use stuff out and see how they like it. And if it's not looking great for who you think is going to be a strong user, it's going to be a tough go down the road, right? So that helps. And then once, they've gotten in and they start to like the product and they start to use it a little more regularly, and you start to get the rest of the team rolled out. Now you've got these power users in our locations that they can get help from, really quickly.
So they get involved in the training of new hires or get involved in training on updates and whatnot?
Yeah, absolutely. And so one of the things that we've done is, we've built out an agency portal. So it's an internal, basically an intranet, if kind of old school saying, but, and we have a lot of training videos on here's how you, start a ticket in AgencyZoom. Here's how you do this. And that's kind of our process.
Yeah, I feel like I could do a whole podcast on intranet, because I do feel like, even though it's a little old school, I think not enough people use that to their advantage.
Well, it's tough, right? And especially in the multi-location, situation where we just have, users all over. We needed a central hub of where people could go to find things. And we tried early on to just use Google Drive, just use that, but it was just tough to search and find what you needed. And so we built out, a little intranet portal that, the team can use with, and just get in there quickly, find what they need. And, it's searchable. It makes it really easy.
Yeah. And so I'm guessing, when you put in maybe training videos and things like that for the technology, do you use the staff in some of that, or is that some stuff that you use, or you just use
usually it's a staff member that'll have, all right, record your process this next time you do it. We don't like to waste any movement. So if they're going to get in there and have to make a change anyways or do something, it's like, all right, we'll record you while you're doing it,
Yeah. And that's also empowering to them to feel like they're a part of the process and not just having it dictated to them what they're doing. They're a part of it, correct?
Yeah, for sure. And, the thing with, implementing things and just change in general, right, that I think a lot of people, we like change. As agency owners, we're good with change. We want to always keep improving to get better and better and better, but there's a group of people within your agency that are change adverse, right? And that's in any business, you
100%.
know? And so it's tough to sometimes get those people to come along. And so you only have so much change capital is kind of what we call it, you know, where you can only change things so often and so frequently, you know, before you start to lose, you know, half the boat because they're just freaking out from the change. So we try to, like, you know, change a couple of things here, tweak a couple of things here, and then sort of let that settle out, you know, and then once we're feeling like, okay, we've got this process down, we feel like most of the teams having it's being adopted and used. All right, you know, are we in love with this process? You know, did we test it out? How's it going? You know, all that fun stuff. And then, you know, if we need to make tweaks, we can. But if you're changing things left and right, it's tough. And then that also impacts adoption, because if they know that you're going to throw something out there and then 2 weeks later you're going to rip it out for some other shiny object, you know, you'll never get it. So there's only so much change capital that you have, and you have to spend it and use it wisely on the leadership front.
Yeah, so I got like 3 questions at one time I want to ask, so I got to figure out which one to go with first, because you've got a couple of things in there that I wanted to ask about. But, you know, you brought up in, you know, getting some of that, you know, adoption and whatnot. I feel like, you know, there's a lot of agencies, I feel like you're in a minority. A lot of agencies aren't open to change like you guys are. They're more of, this is the way things have always been done. And when you bring something in, and another thing that you had mentioned, so I may just combine all 3 questions into one and figure it out. Follow my squirrel brain. But, you know, but then again, when they do bring in this new technology, then a lot of times the staff, as you mentioned, they may just check out like, well, Drew's going to bring something in 5 minutes later and just replace this. They don't buy in. And then, you know, so I feel like some of those things go hand in hand. And so I feel like a big epidemic that we have in agencies right now is they don't adopt the technology. And so I guess. Yeah,
and I would agree with you. And that this even goes into processes, you know, just with how you manage your daily process within your agency. You know, if you throw something out there and this is the new way you do it, but you know, you're going to change it in 2 weeks later, you know, you just can't get that adoption. It kind of goes, you know, it's not exclusive to technology by any means, you know, it's with everything you do.
You have to have a lot of intentionality in that, in my opinion.
Yep. I agree.
And so I also feel like, you know, with that, I think, so my question to you would be, what is your leash when you bring on new technology? How long do you give it before you realize we're not going to adopt it, we made the wrong move? Or do you have a certain time frame you feel like you have a leash on that?
You know, you can generally tell pretty early, but we usually try to make some, maybe it's just a couple of little tweaks here and there, you know, to adjust and make it go. I don't think we have a specific time period on our brain, but as soon as we feel like that customer experience is starting to get hurt, you know, we want to know that and we want to get on that early. You know, so that's, I don't know, it's tough to put a number on it, but it's definitely in the back of our minds, and we definitely monitor and try to keep our eye on it. You know, I'm thinking now of a couple of products that we brought on that ultimately didn't make it, you know, without throwing names out there, but you know, it's
but you've caught on pretty quick, or do you feel like, oh, we probably should have quit this a long time ago?
We probably should have pulled. I think in any of these scenarios, if it's not the right fit, you always probably could have pulled the plug sooner, right? You always kind of want to make it work. But you know, it just sort of happens, and you know, it's good to listen to those outside opinions, and certainly you have to talk to your team members. You know, one of my favorite things is Billy Wagner's saying of what would it look like if it was easy, you know, type of a thing. And I try to keep that in my brain a little bit when we're, you know, talking with the team about doing something or, you know, implementing a new tool, right? Because if it adds extra steps and it's not easy, it's clunky, or the experience starts to hurt, well, we gotta do something there. We can't live with that.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna ask you one. It may be a harder one for you, but it's serious to me. But if you've got somebody in your team that just refuses to adopt a new technology, or they like, I'm stuck in my ways here, I'm not going to bring this in, how do you handle those situations?
In my opinion, it tends to work itself out eventually.
Okay.
you know, so here, and the reason I say that is a lot of the tools, specifically AgencyZoom, particularly, you know, with reports and things that we can run in AMS, you know, we try to be super transparent about the activities and things that are happening in the agency. And so in our team meetings, you know, we throw the data up there. It's everybody's data, you know, okay, here's all the activity data, policy change data, and all that. And so if you have somebody on your service team and they're not using the system, and it looks like they're not doing any work. And meanwhile, Susie is got done 500 activities this past 2 weeks. And eventually they're not going to want to see themselves on the bottom of a leaderboard forever, and they'll probably either move on or something's going to happen.
It's a culture thing then.
Or they'll adopt it. It is a cultural thing, and so it is. Push comes to shove, usually they'll either slide out or they'll start using the technology, and it's all in how you embrace it and how you train it and approach people with it. So.
Yeah, I appreciate all of that. I think you're dead on, and some of that intentionality and making it part of your culture and letting your team know the expectations of when we bring this on, this is how it's going to be implemented. Okay, so you've brought up
and that comes back to holding kind of just holding the standard. This is our process. If we're not doing the process how our process is defined now, then you're not holding the standard, and you have to hold people accountable to that. And sometimes that's not fun, but there are ways that you can do it in less extreme manners. Certainly Alan and I by no means are boot camp instructors out there. If anything, we're probably the other way, a little bit, and a little too casual, too friendly with stuff. But like I said, I think eventually those scenarios tend to work themselves out.
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. But I do think you have to have that as part of your culture. You've brought up AgencyZoom a couple of times, which I appreciate, being on the Vertafore Insurance podcast. And so I appreciate that. But okay, so you guys basically fell in love with it from the jump, from what I hear from you. And you were able to get the adoption because of some of those things. And by no means do I want you to feel like you have to say some of the things that, I'm going to ask you about. So be as candid as you want to be. But what are some of the main things or the main functionalities that you use, your CRM for?
Yeah. So in the early days, it was just on the sales. That's how we managed our sales pipeline. I remember literally after, when we first were implementing it, I had a producer at the time come to me, and, and we were so busy at the time because we had, developed a good buzz, and, he was saying, hey, I'm having trouble keeping track of all this stuff. He's had a little sheet that he was using, and I was like, we've got just the tool. If you just give us 1 week, So early on it was sales. And then, as the service pipeline or the service, tool started to roll out, we adopted that pretty quickly. And then,
can I stop you? Can I back you up a minute on the sales? Do you have specific buckets within your CRM that you walk them through as far as, they're here and then they move to here and they move to here? Could you talk me through that a little bit? Let's make it
So we try to keep it super clean. I think our pipeline's only maybe 4 or 5 stages.
Hit me with those stages. What are those stages?
The first one's basically quote request. Somebody reaches out, fills out a quote request. They're dumped into the new stage, and we start filling out, starting to contact them to get the information that we need to quote, whatever that is. So that's like somebody fills out a simple form, or, somebody I happen to catch at the grocery store or something like, oh yeah, I see your stuff. I'd love for you to reach out to us, and so we have some simple automations in there to try to help facilitate, keep that conversation going. So we don't forget about it. Right. And then sort of the next stage, I think this was like a Zoom default one, but it was contacted. I think we added in quoting on there. So we've made contacted, we've got all the info, we're starting to do our quotes, and then we have, quote delivered. And then from there, we just go right to sold. So we keep it super short. It's kind of interesting. I was talking with somebody, Austin Moorhead from Lava Automation, if I can shout him out. Great guy. And he knows AgencyZoom like nobody I've ever met before. And he was kind of showing me some of their tools, and it's so much more in depth, right? He's almost got like 20 stages, which is great. It's cool. But, again, it comes back to adoption. What can you get your team to sort of take on and figure out? And talking with Austin, I really love this message that he had sort of put, was like, look, we have these stages because they're different parts of the playbook. You don't need to have that full playbook, but if you want it, it's there,
100%. And I love that. But I also love that you mentioned briefly, you've got some automations from when they go to this stage to this stage, these things are happening behind the scenes. So your team doesn't have to do anything. It's just happening. and they're being touched. And then when you move them to the third stage and the fourth stage, so
right.
And that doesn't.
And I think it's something like I want to say it's either on the 6th or 7th time, that you've tried to contact somebody is when they'll respond and you'll make the sale.
That's the average. Yeah, you're right.
A lot of times, in our industry, we can be one and done. So we try to use that automation to lift that off their plates. We can put that kind of behind the scenes, and it's always kind of poking and prodding to get the information that we need to start, the next steps for doing our job.
Well, then your team understands and they know, okay, it's in stage 2. This email just went out, so they're expecting this to happen next, and they maybe get a task from their CRM or their agency management system.
Time to call on this one.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So you're able
that's kind of how we use
the process using that CRM, correct? And the AMS for that matter, because you said that integration's fantastic for you.
It does, yeah. And you have to remember, your service team, our service team, when somebody calls in, it's just ingrained in them. The first thing that they're going to check is their agency management system. So we dump them into AMS as soon as we know it's a qualified lead. So that way they can, as soon as they search for somebody there, it pulls up. Our phone system, Lightspeed integrates with 360, so they call, the screen pops up. It just makes it a lot simpler. So as soon as service, somebody calls the office kind of blindly and that they can find it quickly. It's helpful to have that integration.
Yeah, thank you for walking me through your buckets. And so then from the sales, once it goes into the service, do you have specific pipelines there, or do you have specific things set up there? What does that look like? And let me come from this perspective.
So I will tell you, after it moves to sold, it kicks off our onboarding process. So things like getting an email from Alan and I, welcoming them to the agency, asking for a Google review, and all kind of the fun things that we like to do to make sure it's a positive experience the whole way through once we actually sold the policy. So that's a key step. That's not its own pipeline. It's kind of at the tail end of when we move something into sold and it's done.
Okay, so once you hit into sold, how many touch points do you have? I love to know how many they have set up. You've mentioned 2 already.
I think we're 4 or 5 total on the onboarding front, and then it slides into a retention, which is within our service pipelines.
And so how many do you have there within the service?
We have kind of your general service task pipeline. So if somebody calls in for a policy change, needs to update their policy. So there's a pipeline that's dedicated for that type of stuff. And then we have a pipeline for renewals. So for like commercial lines, we have our whole commercial renewal process is ingrained in AgencyZoom. And so 180 days out, 120 days out, service ticket is created and we start moving it through a pipeline, just similar to our sales pipeline. That one's a little more complex just because of the renewal process. But so we have that. And then we also have claims. So if somebody calls in, they have a claim, it has its own little pipeline. We'll open a ticket just to kind of keep track of where things are at, and it has some of those built-in touch points similar to our sales thing, but related to a claims process, so we can make sure clients heard from an adjuster, things are going okay. Kind of do our little part.
Right. So let's go back to the onboarding process. You've got 4 or 5 touch points there. Let's take it from this perspective. I got listeners listening here now that are, either new to Vertafore, maybe not even in it yet, or they've been using it for a while. What's some advice that you could give them on that onboarding campaign and how they could use AgencyZoom or a CRM for that matter to better their onboarding campaign?
I mean, just think of the touch points that you want to have, like in your ideal agency, right? So like you can set up tasks, things like if you want to send a thank you note, to your customer, that's like a handwritten one, you could create that task. So, what I always tell people, your big ones is I like to do a welcome to the agency little email. It comes from the agency owner, it talks about, how you can work with us. If you need service, here's how you get it. Here's what happens if you have a claim. All these are good ideas for kind of touch points. You don't want to obviously hammer in a thing that's so long that nobody's ever going to read it.
Right.
But all those are kind of good, and how you want them to work with you. So if you have a service portal or you use something like a glove box or whatever, direct them that, hey, if you need a policy change, here's how you do it. You go to this, log into your portal and request it. So that's kind of what I like to keep in mind is like, so what's kind of your ideal process? If you're already, you have an agency and every Monday, the agency owner is sending out thank you notes or whatever, just build that into your process so it doesn't get lost as you start to scale.
Awesome. So, you would tell agencies to think about what they would want, and then kind of take it from
there.
I
think and like what they would want and how you want your ideal customer to interact with you, because if you said you want to send everybody through a mobile app and all your service through this place or email box, whatever that might be, and very quickly the people that don't want to do that are going to pop up, and then you have kind of a decision to make. Probably didn't hit my ideal customer there. What can we tweak to make things different so we're attracting more of the people that want to use a mobile app, because that's how we work best. Which I'm not saying is for us. We'd have like every line of communication because we're old school, right?
Right.
Rooted in old school, I should say. But just think about how you want your customers to interact with you. And this is a perfect thing for onboarding, is to teach them how to interact. So it's not a mystery at the, when it's time for them to get help or, file a claim.
So we've done the sales pipeline, we've hit the onboarding. From there, once you move into the retention pipeline or the service pipeline, whichever one you want to go into next, could you walk me through a little bit of that for those listening to give some ideas and maybe some advice?
Yeah. So again, I think, we're talking like things that we built out over a few years, right? We try to keep it simple in the beginning, and then, you think of your basic touch points that you want, so for service, right, it's basically how they interact with us. So if they call the agency, email the agency, we open up this ticket that creates the ticket. And then within that ticket, the beauty of a ticketing system is that, all the activities that need to happen exist within this ticket. So if Mrs. Jones down the street calls to change your auto, I can open that ticket up, or anybody in the agency can open that ticket up and see exactly what's happening. This is different from 360, right? Because when you open up like your activity list, it's like you have the activities that have ever happened, and so if things happen in between, it can get out of sync and it can get a little hard to read. The beauty of a ticketing system is that, everything related to that policy change that Mrs. Jones requested on, November 9th, every piece of, touches that have happened or needed to happen exist within that ticket. And you can see it very quickly where things went great, or maybe they went off the rails.
And so do you set up that ticket system? It's, kind of a template for all of your customers, that ticket, or you have to set up a separate
it's
ticket?
A pipeline. It's a pipeline just like, just like anything else. And so, policy changes for various types of policies just go in there.
And it gives you
service requests.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's also how we distribute. So, that's how we've been able to balance our workload a little better. Kind of a old school method in insurance agencies was to you split your servicing by alphabet. Yeah. Which works great until a point where you've scaled where you can only dice up the alphabet so many times before it gets a little strange. Yeah. And then the thing that we never loved about it was that whoever had A through J, 1 week she's just getting hammered, and the lady that has, the next section is twiddling her thumbs,
Sure.
So we use assignment groups within AgencyZoom within those tickets to divvy up, round robin work,
awesome.
So it just level sets the workflow. And then depending on the policy change, maybe it goes to our processing staff, something like that. So it's how we distribute, who's going to handle and do what work.
And so the whole team knows how that operates and knows how that works, and they all put things in the same way.
Yep.
Or they all have their own autonomy.
Well, that's the idea, anyways, right?
Yeah.
On any given day, process might not get followed, but that's the plan, and service comes in, set the ticket, assign it to the right assignment group, and you're off and running.
Okay, so anything else? Okay, we stopped at ticketing for a minute. So as far as that goes, anything else beyond the ticketing that you were going to talk about when it comes to the service pipeline or the retention pipeline?
So also built in there is, like I said, our renewal pipelines. So I think, that's where we've gotten a lot of value too, is our commercial renewal process. Okay. It has its own stages, whether something needs to go into remarket, whether we need to get supplementals, and as we're approaching that renewal date, have we received all of, an actual renewal, or, do we need to do something, so that has helped. And especially with our commercial team meeting, we can just throw that up on we throw it up on a big screen TV and we just say, all right, where's this at? Where's this at? And we kind of work through that in our, commercial team meeting. And so that's really helped, because otherwise, it's kind of exists in suspenses and things, which can be hard to sort of keep track of for that type of stuff. And, for a client to go through 120 days out to renewal date, there's a lot of steps that happen in between there.
Yeah, so I've been on this, I guess, this soapbox or this thought process for a little bit now, and I've heard this a lot lately. And I know you're a Vertafore guy, but I still want you to hear just your thoughts in general. If people have told me at conferences lately that we've had the conversation like, I don't need an AMS because I've got my CRM, or I don't need a CRM because I have my AMS, or they confuse the two for doing the same things. And so,
Yeah, happens all the time. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
I
so
see it
talk
everywhere.
to me your thoughts on that. What do you think about that? What are your feelings on that?
I view the CRM as, at the end of the day, insurance is relationship business, and that's where we manage that customer's relationships and their experiences. The AMS on, sort of on that side of the house. And believe me, I would be one of the first people, if I could toss out the AMS and just use a CRM, I would love to do it. The AMS, is kind of like your filing cabinet system, and it's where, it's like where the official things sort of happen behind the scenes, where you keep track of, all your signed documents and all that. Certainly you can do that to some degree in the CRM. Also on the flip side of the thing, we do this accounting system and all that. Yeah, there's some give and take there. I'd love to see a world where, it was all, you only needed one, but right now, the things that the AMS does well are, unique from the things that the CRM does well. And so kind of feel you need both.
Yeah. And, we've talked about it a little bit that, you almost have to have the AMS for even just E&O purposes, just to cover, and keep track and make sure.
Yeah, because that's, rooted in, case law is, if it goes into the AMS, then, that's, what officially happened that date and time, so it is important.
Yeah, and I think like going back to what you talked about, the processes and having them documented, that's also going to help you. And if you ever have a situation for E&O, like this is how our process, how we do it every time, and you can check the system.
Yep, exactly. Yep, it's critical.
Yeah. I do think that. And so, agencies right now that, that are listening, I would love to hear, kind of, again, your sales pitch for why an agency would need a CRM, because again, there's a lot more that don't have it than do out there. And I was shocked to that, to find that out. I spoke at a group not too long ago and raised a hand who's got a CRM, and like 4 people raised their hand, and it's like, holy smokes, I would have thought everybody had one. So you're a CRM guy, not even just Zoom. I love that you're a Zoom guy, but just in general, tell the audience listening right now, maybe if they're on the edge, maybe push them off the edge a little bit for me.
Well, first of all, whether it's Zoom or whatnot, I the investment is not as significant as an AMS. Give it a try, right? Usually there's not, a lot of more than, there's not periods where you're locked in, with like an AMS, there's not as much commitment. So give it a try. But what I like about the CRM is it allows us to be proactive in both our sales and our service. And I touched on the sales piece a little bit. My team, if we also have, lead sources built out. So, for contractors, for, apartment buildings, whatever it might be, so if we get a contact that we know that's in the industry, we can drop them into this and, let automation, let our team use it for prospecting. So it's super critical for helping us get kind of a little more proactive, versus reactive, and then on the service side of things with this ticketing system, it's allowing us to keep up with, okay, where's this in the service pipeline? Is it been here forever? Am I, and then our management team can see these tickets that have been sitting out there and, we got to do something before Mrs. Jones, has a cow over why we haven't gotten back to. So it allows us to just be a little more proactive than reactive. And so that's kind of what I like a CRM, and it helps us build that relationship, things, we all have the best intentions with things like onboarding, with cross-selling and all that type of stuff. And as soon as that phone starts ringing, it's easy to lose those, lose the ideas that you had for, those best intentions. They'll drop off the plate and off the table, and, you're just dealing with whoever's calling on the phone. So CRM, I think that's kind of the biggest takeaway I'd have for you, is it allows us to be a little more proactive, and that's where we're headed as an agency.
Yeah, I think you're dead on there. And I love how you brought that up. And everybody uses their CRM in a different way, and everybody sees things differently
Yeah.
there. And some people like the drip campaign aspect. Some people like the way you were just talking about. Some people like other things. One of the things you brought up, I'd love to hear you come back to some. And if this is something you guys do regularly, is you brought up leaderboards. Do you use that with your sales team? Is to put everything's transparent?
Yep. Sales. I mean, when you log into Zoom, everybody sees it from the beginning. But so we hold a team-wide meeting. I think it's every other week. And so we'll throw up all of our sales data. We throw up our service activity data. Because there's great dashboards and reporting all built in Zoom, and so we can see how many policy changes came through, or how many are still sitting out there open that need to be closed. So there's great data to be had there, which is nice. I'm a big data guy, and so.
We'll talk about the accountability piece in that.
Yeah. Well, nobody wants to be in the bottom of the leaderboard, right? Yeah. So it just helps people, drive a little bit of competitiveness, but positive competitiveness. Sure. It's not something that, we're never going to be in an environment where we're trying to push each other down to make a sale, but, you want to look, you see that your team member's doing well, and you want to do your part and do well. And, it has always helpful in that producer CSR, relationship, that, sometimes they're pretty isolated from each other's success, right? Or what they're doing. And so, when they can see each other's data, then they know that, Michael's been pretty darn busy, or, Susie's been very busy. No wonder, when I talked to her the other day, she was a little stressed,
Right. But we talked about this even at our lunch today, even as our team was talking, we're like, if someone's behind or somebody's taking a couple of days off or something, then the team could pick up and see, here's Sally's tasks that come, here's what's going on with her book, right?
Yeah. And that's what allows our management team to do too, right? So if we know that, Susie's coming up on a vacation, right? The first thing we do is we sit down and we take a look at open tickets out there and things that are coming down the pipeline, and what can we spread around to make sure we're going to handle, and there's no surprises when she's gone. I mean, there's usually a surprise somewhere, but it's something that popped up new, right?
Right. But having that place everyone can go to see it all and see the dashboards and see what it looks like, and knowing that all this stuff happens behind the scenes, super cool.
Yep. And then, we're trying to foster this environment too, right? We're some of our newer folks that are a little more behind the scenes, but have, lots of processing power. If if their plate starts to get a little light, they can go grab tickets from other people and just take it and, knock it out for them, so it does help. Yeah, it does help, I think, with that a little bit. Somebody has to be pretty self-motivated for that, but at the same end of it, they can see when, this team member is just buried and they're not, and they can help relieve some of that. And of course, our management team can generally see that too. So that helps.
Now, we didn't discuss this, so if I'm wrong, then we could edit it out, I'm guessing. But do you use VAs at all, or do you use VEs or anything like that?
We do. Yep.
Okay. So are they involved in the CRM or just the AMS?
They are. Yeah. And that was, right when we brought them on was when we implemented the service side of Zoom. Right on. And so that really helped with adoption, because we said, here's how you're going to get work to our VE. So that was huge. And it was okay. All right, send a ticket off and she takes care of it. Great. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a crucial part of people that tell me, especially early on when VAs first were introduced to our industry, it's like, they don't work for me. We have too complicated a system, or it takes too long for adoption, or this, that, and the other. But if you have a set process, if you have a CRM to document all that and tell you how to do it, and have the ticketing system and have all that, wouldn't you say to have a CRM is going to help you train your VEs?
I think for sure. And honestly, those processes that we talked about before, where somebody's recording a video on how to do something, like our VEs watch those things like 7 or 8 times, Yeah. That person who's not going to adopt it won't even watch it once, but they're going to watch it 7 or 8 to make sure they're figuring it out and they're doing it right. But, for us, we were not by any means early in the VE, virtual employee game. It wasn't something we jumped in until, if anybody's tried to hire in this current environment, or even as of a few years ago, it's really hard. And the reality is we want our people that are in-house doing those more complex work, that more complex task, I don't need to be paying that person to be doing a mortgage e-change when I could have a VE doing this very efficiently, and so that's what it came down to, is there's plenty of processing that needs to happen. And I need my, best CSRs and service team members and sales guys to be able to focus on the work that they need to do and not get bogged down with, the little stuff that we can build a little team to just knock out and do it much faster than if we put it on their plate.
Okay, so true or false, it's easier to train a VA or to get more production out of your VA by having a CRM?
True. Yeah, because you have to figure out how you're going to get them work. And I think that's the biggest thing is, rather than just emailing, can you do this? Can you do this? Sending that ticket off, and then they have this, item that they're keeping track of, and it's working through your processes, and you can come back and see, oh, where is she at with those changes later, or he is critical. So for sure. But the key with VEs and VAs is that you have to have defined processes. If you do not have defined processes, you're going to have a hard time. And I think any of the VAs and VE companies out there would agree with me saying that. When they're successful, you have a defined process how you do it. You can't leave it to them to try to figure out. It's not easy. Or if you have multiple different ways you're doing things, it can get confusing too. So you have to have a defined process, and that's kind of the first step to really using a VE well.
Yeah, and so as we start to wrap up, I noticed at the conferences I have seen you at and been around you at, people come up to you and ask you quite a bit, about how you use Zoom or how you use this piece, Taylor, how you use that. What's the most common thing that you hear? What's the most common question that you answer for most agencies out there listening?
I think it's around the service, and particularly whether it's renewals or claims, or even just some of the service. So when Zoom first came out, there was a bunch of us legacy users that just had the sales thing, and then you had to switch your subscription style to add in those service stuff. So there's a lot of people that are like, oh, are you using the service? Are you getting value out of it? Are you using the service, features, or, are you making pipelines for your renewals? So I think that's kind of where it comes around. Or they'll ask, about our commercial renewal process, and that is pretty well defined in Zoom, so I have to bring it up.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of the big thing. Is the early adopters and folks that were using Zoom and still loved Zoom. They were on the older model that didn't include service, and so they had to decide if they wanted to make that jump or not. And we did, and was successful. So I think that's where I get a lot of the questions.
Awesome, man. Drew, this flew by. I could sit here and talk to you for a long time about all this, especially when we're talking about Big Orange, but I really appreciate you coming in, hanging out with us today and talking to us. Guys, if you don't, follow Drew Kinney or are connected with him on LinkedIn, I would say connect with him there, and he would gladly answer your questions or just connect with you and help you out in any way. I've gotten to know Drew pretty well, and I'm going to speak for him and say he'll be glad to help you in any way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, make sure you reach out to Drew.
You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Instagram, Agent Drew Kinney. Our website's KinneyINS.com, and we all have our emails out there. So you could find me one way or another, but happy to answer questions, happy to show, kind of how we do things. And the reason I'd love to do that is, frankly, that's how I got,
There you go.
As much as I was a power user, I had people that, Matt Namoli helped me out. In the early days from Zoom, Kat was huge. Sometimes I would just reach out to her with an idea, and she would meet me in a couple of mornings, before she even started her day, and we would hash it out. So
that's awesome.
I got better because people helped me, and I love to help people wherever I can.
Yeah, and if you're north of the border in Canada and you want to fight Drew about the maple syrup, don't come to my inbox. Go to Drew Kinney's inbox. I don't want to hear all that.
Bring the smoke. I'm ready.
There you go. All right,
Although we had enough Canadian smoke.
That's true. That's true as well. Good call there.
All right, Heath. I appreciate you, man.
All right, have a good one. Well, that was a great episode.
Amazing. It was an amazing episode.
I really enjoyed that content. Guys, if you enjoyed that content and you want more of it, make sure you hit the subscribe button.
Nah, dude. You got to tell them to crush it. Crush that subscribe button, guys.
All right. Whether you want to crush it, smash it, hit it.
Bop it?
Sure, we could bop it. Either way, guys, we don't want you to miss another episode. We enjoy spending time with you, the VIP.
Yeah. We'll see you next week.